Today I'm going to give you some reasons as to why you might not want to keep wild-caught animals. You might be confused by the title of this video because a couple of my animals are wild-caught. So there's kind of two types of wild-caught animals. So firstly, there's kind of two types of wild-caught animals. Those that you basically go out and catch outside, and those that are basically mass imported from different countries. So I'm going to be talking about those that you basically go out and catch. The imported ones are arguably way worse, but I can talk about that in a separate video. But you might also be a bit confused by the title because I do have a couple wild-caught animals. I'm not saying that you shouldn't keep them, I'm just giving you some of the risks and dangers that you need to keep in mind before choosing to keep one. Firstly, and probably most importantly, is you need to make sure it's actually legal to keep that animal. Any animal that's on a threatened, endangered, or some other sort of special list in the US in your state is going to be illegal for you to keep. The special list might simply be another group of animals that you just cannot go out and keep. So you need to make sure that that individual species is okay. An important note is if you do find one in a state park, I'm pretty sure in every state of the US it is illegal to keep and remove any animal in that park. On top of that, there's going to be a limit, I believe in most states, on how many wild-caught animals you can keep. For example, in North Carolina, you can keep, I believe it's 4 native reptiles and 25 or 30 native amphibians. But if you do somehow end up getting caught with an animal that you are keeping illegally, well, firstly, there's going to be a reason that you're not allowed to keep it. And secondly, you can risk any of your other animals also being taken away. And depending on what it is, you can end up with fines or other obvious problems. Secondly, is that animal you're taking contributing to an environment? Personally, this one is really important to me, and I would never want to keep an animal that's doing its job somewhere. However, even if you do just go on to maybe some sort of public game lands or some random chunk of woods that has little mini ecosystems or is a big, large ecosystem, you probably don't want to take away from that. Each animal obviously is going to have a role, and an individual might not make that big of a difference. However, it will make a little difference because every animal can contribute quite a bit. And on top of that, if everyone's taking just 1 or 2 animals, then that can really add up. The only time I consider keeping the animal is if they appear to be injured from some sort of unnatural thing, like maybe they were hit by a car or messed with by a person, or if they're in an area that they're potentially going to be hurt or killed because of people. For example, this guy was at a construction site in a neighborhood really with no easy access to woods. I wouldn't be taking anything away from that area by removing an animal. You can always choose to relocate these animals to areas, or if you have another reason, keep them, but that's something important to keep in mind. Third, a really big concern, I guess kind of all these are, but that's parasites. In nature, there's going to be parasites and ticks and mites and fleas and all sorts of things that your reptiles can potentially pick up. If you do decide to keep one and you have any other animals, even if you don't, you just need to keep it in a very stable sort of place away from all your other animals, because if somehow a parasite gets to all your animals, it's really gonna suck, and it's gonna cost you either a lot of money at a vet or potentially harm or kill some of your animals. So whether that is some sort of mite you can just see on the outside and treat, or an internal parasite, you do need to be careful because those can spread. You probably want to keep them away from any of their animals for a good few weeks if you decide to keep them, but that is a big concern that you should have. Next, how is that animal going to do in captivity? If they're used to being out in the wild all their life, then they might not be so used to it. If there's an animal that was bred in captivity, then that's all it knows, and it's going to be completely fine in that. However, an animal that knows what it's like to have basically unlimited space might not be used to a more confined area. This can lead to different things, whether it's stress or not eating or hurting itself in the enclosure trying to get out. But you really need to carefully watch all these things to make sure it's not going to get sick or hurt or too stressed out, because stress is very dangerous to reptiles. When I found Shadow here in that construction site sort of neighborhood area, I said I was only going to keep him if I could get him eating and comfortable very quickly. He immediately took a meal a few days after I got him, and he immediately started to cool down and become more calm. Other animals definitely have not in the past, so I relocated those as quickly as I could. But you really just want to make sure their stress levels are low and they're not going to freak out because they might not be used to that sort of setup. Finally, are you sure you want to keep it? You should never release a pet, whether it was born out in the wild or born in captivity, because they can develop different sort of bacteria and germs that might not necessarily affect them, but could easily affect other animals in the area. This has been unfortunately very common in amphibians with different funguses that have been introduced into the wild populations. These can be very dangerous and do a lot of harm. So once you have this animal and it's been like a couple weeks and you still have it, so if it's been more than a few weeks and you still have that animal, at that point you really should not release it, because one, there is that huge danger that it's developed something that could potentially harm animals outside, and two, it might just not remember how to survive really, because an animal in its enclosure is always going to get food and clean water and not really need to defend itself. It's possible that it could kind of just stop worrying about that sort of thing and it would do terrible outside. So those are my reasons on why you should consider not keeping certain wild-caught animals. So if that animal is not going to take away from the environment when it's not there, and if you've thought about all the other things I've mentioned, then it's not necessarily bad to keep them in my opinion. But yeah, in the comments let me know your opinions on this thing, on keeping wild-caught animals. If you're interested, I can talk more about the wild-caught animals that are imported, which I would say are a lot worse than just catching one animal outside and keeping it. But that'll be it for this video. I'm Alex, and thanks for watching.